Folks, my name is Miranda. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and sex therapist in Erie, Pennsylvania. And today I want to talk about minor attracted persons. And I want to talk about minor attracted persons because they are probably the most vilified population of folks in our culture. And most folks are making incorrect assumptions about them without actually knowing much about them. And those assumptions create harm for an already marginalized population. You may have noticed that I'm using the term minor attracted persons, sometimes abbreviated to MAPs, instead of the more commonly used term pedophile. And I'm doing this because the term pedophile has moved from being a diagnostic label to being a judgmental, hurtful insult that we hurl at people in order to harm them or slander them. I also prefer person-first language that recognizes that any label we might apply to a person is only part of who they are and doesn't represent everything that they are.
So once again, there were two separate wings or branches of feminist thought. Okay, it was called sex-negative feminists and sex-positive feminists. Sex-negative feminists were saying, well, the way that a woman empowers herself is to not engage in sexual acts because her sort of sex, that was sort of like her power, right? So the sex positive feminists had kind of beef with the sex negative feminists because the sex positive feminists were saying no, women should engage in sex as a means of empowerment. Sex negative feminists and this is what the sex positive feminists said about the sex negative feminists, and it frightened the sex negative feminists because the sex negative feminists didn't want to have conservative allies. The sex positive feminists were telling the sex negative feminists that you and the conservatives have a lot alike. You're telling women to be chaste, to not be overly sexual, etc., etc. You almost sound like a religion. You almost sound like an evangelical or a social conservative. And this, of course, gave rise to the whole Handmaid's Tale and everything else. We see that, right? And so if you tell women to be restrictive sexually, then that will lead to some sort of conservative oppression. But the positive sex feminists came along and they began to say, in short, that all manner of sexual perversion is to be indulged. I'm going to refer back to another video that I got uploaded about monkeypox and HIV because I made reference to this person. As a matter of fact, she is considered by many to be the founder of what we call queer theory today. Her name is Judith Butler. Judith Butler, she wrote an essay in 1984 entitled Thinking Sex, where she actually began, and there's another sex positive feminist that comes to mind by the name of Judith Butler. Gayle Rubin. I don't know if I said Judith, but Gayle Rubin is the woman who is the founder of queer theory. Gayle Rubin wrote an essay in 1984 titled Thinking Sex. And there's another sex positive feminist named Judith Butler. Those two sort of go hand in hand. A sex negative feminist would probably be maybe like a Phyllis Schlafly, someone like that, who, sort of like a big time, like I said, she was pro-tradition, nuclear family, these sort of various things, but she sort of viewed herself as a kind of a woman's empowerment kind of a figure. But like I say, she sort of talked about the opposite. So the question then sort of centers around sex itself and how we view sex socially, and more importantly, especially according to Gayle Rubin, how we view sex politically, because sex, according to Gayle Rubin, is not just some kind of private matter between two consenting individuals. Sex is, in fact, a political act as well, or more importantly, it is a political act. But minor attracted persons. In the essay, Thinking Sex by Gayle Rubin, she names in all of her political correct splendor pedophilic sex as cross-generational encounters is what she's calling it, right? And so there is the blending sort of like of the two. You said, man, how in the hell are we coming from? How is the LGBT and this sort of thing? How is this thing kind of coming together? And the reason why and here's where they connect, because you're pulling the root out, you're taking the bottom out. Because when it comes to men and women and our sexual nature, men and women as human beings have a nature that was given by something greater than themselves. When you pull the rug out from underneath that, you're opening up the floodgates, because now the nature, or man's, and when I say man, I mean human beings in general, men and women, their sexual nature becomes a matter of subjectivity. And when you're talking about left-wing extremists, the only subjectivity that matters is a structural, as they see it, subjectivity that you only embody, not because it's what you think, but it is because someone told you to think that way. So when you say, man, I don't think that a grown man should be having sex with a minor. Why? Who told you that? Why do you think that? And so on and so forth. And so they began to kind of deconstruct the norms, because in essence, I don't know if I'm getting a little bit too far off the sub, but in essence, that's what leftism is for anyone who's curious, who does not understand. Leftism is simply a term that means I am going to deconstruct or destroy the existing order, whatever that order may be. And in order to have a society, in order to have a civilization that has order, you have to have a healthy sense of sort of moral and ethical judgment. And when you start pulling away at that, you're saying that, well, we can have sex with whomever we please. Or, you know, if the girl liked it, if the girl, she's 12, 13, if she wanted it, then fine. They're consenting, so let it be. Because there should be no distinction, of course, between child and adult. Because if the adult has kind of primacy over the child, then that puts the child in a position of oppressed, because they can't be as free sexually as I can, because I'm a grown man. So what these people are attempting to do is find lines of demarcation wherever they can find it, and remove the line, so that way the very nature, the very essence of good and evil, right and wrong, that line is no longer there. It's all blurred, therefore everything goes. Anything goes.